Alright, this is going to be our second trigonometry lesson, and we're going to take those ratios from our last video, and now we're going to put them to some use, and I'm going to show you kind of how we would use them to solve for some missing information. So we're going to get right into an example here, and I'll show you how we use those ratios and how we solve for missing sides using them. So first thing I want you to add, though, that I don't have here is we're going to solve for k, and we're going to round to the nearest tenth. Okay, so in this picture here, we know that we're looking for the length of side k, all right? And they gave us 53 degrees and that it's a right triangle. So with those two pieces of information, I know I'm going to use trigonometry. Now I can't use Pythagorean theorem because I don't have this side. So I know I have to use one of my trig ratios. So because 53 is the angle that's given to me, that's the angle that we're going to set up our ratios from. So we're going to find our opposite, our adjacent, and our hypotenuse, all based on angle 53. Now, we know our hypotenuse is side k because it is across from the right angle. We know that our opposite side we don't have, so we just leave that blank for now. Okay, and that leaves the only side left as 45 is going to be our adjacent side. So this is going to go down as 45. Now, how do I decide which ratio I'm going to use so I don't have to set up all three? Well, I think about my acronym from the other day. We think about SOHCAHTOA, and I look at the map. This is why the map is really helpful. I have the adjacent and the hypotenuse side. So that means I'm going to use the cosine function. All right? So I'm going to set up cosine of 53 equals 45 over k, because that's how we practiced it in the last video, and that's kind of how we used it to set up equations before. But now we have a missing piece of information. We have k. So how do we find the value of k with this? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to make this into a proportion, and we're going to cross multiply. 45 times 1 is 45, and cosine of 53 times k we're going to write out as k times cosine of 53, because all cosine of 53 really is a number. All right. Now we have to get k by itself. In order to do that, we are going to divide both sides by cosine of 53, that entire thing, and we're going to use our calculator. So k is equal to 45 divided by cosine of 53. Now, I'm going to go to my calculator here on the iPad. It's going to be a little different than yours, but it still works the same. So I'm going to type in 45 divided by the cosine button, 53, and close my parentheses. And I'm going to get my answer as 74.77. Now, I'm going to round this, okay, to the nearest tenth. So we're looking at this 7. We're going to look at the one before it. This 7 is going to turn this 7 into an 8. So our final answer here, as k equals, is going to be 74.8. And that's going to be what equals k. All right, so again, recap here. Solve for k. I'm given one angle and a missing side. Since I don't have two sides, I can't use Pythagorean theorem, and I'm going to use trigonometry instead. So I set up my brace map with angle 53. I find my opposite, my adjacent, my hypotenuse. I pick the correct ratio. I set up my equation, and I cross multiply and solve. And then I'm going to round to the nearest tenth. Okay, so that's how you would go through a question like this. All right, our next problem is going to be the same idea. Okay, we're going to solve for y using one of the three ratios, and again, we're going to round to the nearest tenth. Okay, so again, looking at side y, they give us angle 51, so that's going to be what I use for my brace map to fill out my OA and H. All right, so my hypotenuse is always across from the right angle, so it has to be 12, and whatever's across from my angle is going to be my opposite, so this is going to be y, and it's my opposite, it's my hypotenuse, and that leaves the only leftover side to be my adjacent side. Now, I'm given the opposite and the hypotenuse. Now again, I think about SOHCAHTOA, so I can figure out which ratio I want to use or which function I want to use. And with the opposite and the hypotenuse, I know I want to use my sine function. All right, so my sine function tells me that my angle is equal to my opposite over my hypotenuse. And now once we have this equation set up, all we need to do here is cross multiply and solve. So I'm going to put this over 1. Y times 1 is equal to y, and sine of 51 times 12 is going to be equal to 12 times the sine of 51. Now, I'm going to use my calculator to set this up and solve, and then we're going to round to the nearest 10. In this case, after I cross multiply, the variable is already by itself over here. So all I have to do is finish this expression over here and put it in the calculator. So I go to the calculator, and I do 12 times the sine of 51, and I get my answer as 9.3. Okay, so our answer is 9. Our answer is 9.3 equals y. Okay, so that's how we solve for missing sides using these ratios. First, we look at the angle that we're given. From there, we set up our brace map with opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse. Then we select the appropriate ratio, set up the appropriate ratio, cross multiply, and solve for whatever we're missing for. All right, these are also the two different cases because this one's multiplying, and in the one above, you see that after you cross multiply, you have to divide.